This one does not call, H.R. 24, Kucinich's bill, does not call for an audit. It does not call for an audit at all. Congress does not call for an audit. What this bill does is it gives the Comptroller General permission to ask the Federal Reserve for a modified, limited audit. It gives them permission, but you have to understand that the Comptroller General serves at the pleasure of the President of the United States, is not independent of the President of the United States. The Comptroller General will never reach out and demand any kind of an audit like Congress. Congress can come over and ask for, and that's an independent branch demanding an audit. And this is not independent. The Comptroller General serves at the pleasure of the President. It's unlikely that the Comptroller General is going to violate anything that the President doesn't want, and it would never call for for any kind of an audit. So, first of all, it leaves the other problem with H.R. 2424 is it disappears in 5. It's invisible ink. It's one of these disappearing ink bills. In 5 years, it disappears and leaves the law exactly as it is today. 5 years, it has a sunset, it disappears, and all the ink goes away, and the original flawed bill stands in place with a complete and a total immunity for the Fed. So first of all, it never removes the immunity. It never removes the paragraph. H.R. 1207 removes the paragraph. It never calls for an audit. H.R. 1207 calls for an audit. This simply allows somebody to ask permission for an audit, and an audit of very limited form. H.R. 2424, which I have a copy of, is about 9-10 pages long of exceptions, limitations, and other regulations that are each word and each sentence in this bill is going to cause debate.
This is authored by Dennis Kucinich?
Authored by Dennis Kucinich.
Now,
this very curious as to why.
This seems very uncharacteristic to me of Mr. Kucinich, because I watched Mr. Kucinich, and he called for an impeachment, and he called for it in no uncertain terms. I mean, he went right to the he cut right to the point. Whether you agreed with him or not, he was right to the point with it. And I've heard him talk about the Federal Reserve, and he was pretty. He had some fairly ugly things to say. And I'm surprised that he's backing off. Do you have any, the other thing about Kucinich, it didn't seem like that Kucinich is anybody's man. I mean, Kucinich always seemed like to me he's willing to stand out there and be the, sometimes you might see, at 400 and something to 2, and you'd see Dr. Paul and Dennis Kucinich would be the two that voted against something.
That's correct. He's been a very, very powerful advocate for many different things. He has stood forward with respect to impeachment and very unpopular situations. It is not clear. It is not at all clear why he has submitted a piece of legislation that is completely watered down and does not. It has a name on here that says something about the Federal Reserve, but if this law, for instance, were put into place as opposed to 1207, you'd have no audit of the Federal Reserve in the first place because none is called for here. It merely gives the permission over to the Comptroller General and the Comptroller to request an audit. And if the Comptroller General decides to request an audit, the audit would be very limited by these 9 pages of exceptions of the things that they must follow in order to audit.
So how is this bill doing relative to co-sponsors, and is there any overlap with 1207 or?
No, there's no overlap at all. The bill is first of all, it was only introduced a couple of weeks ago, on I believe the 14th of this month. It has only 3 co-sponsors at the current time. The bill is in committee. It's submitted to a different committee too. Dr. Paul's bill is submitted to the House Committee on Finance, and the House Committee on Financial Services, actually, and that's where Dr. Paul's bill is. Representative Kucinich's bill has been referred to the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, a different committee which is not a money committee. And this being a money bill, one thinks that that's another curiosity as to why, if there was going to be a bill like this submitted, why it wouldn't have come through. He might not have asked for someone to sponsor his bill in the Financial Services Committee, because it has to do with financial situation.
So it's not, I mean, you'd think that if it were a direct, some sort of a direct attack on 1207, that it would have been submitted to the Financial Services Committee to where they could have interacted in that committee against each other. Is that reasonable, or I don't know how this works, actually?
Well, I don't know a lot about how it works either. I just I guess I can only say that it raises more questions than answers, because the bill is far more limited. It does not remove the immunity of the Federal Reserve. It does not call for an audit, and it's like a month or two late, and later than the other bill. I'm not certain as to why the bill was actually submitted, and there are no clear answers yet. And perhaps Representative Kucinich's office will come forward at some point and make it clear as to why this bill was submitted, because it certainly is no substitute for H.R. 1207.
Now, the House Committee on Financial Services, is this Barney Frank's committee?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, is Mr. Frank, is he going to be, is he? How much opposition can Mr. Frank kill this bill?
Well, the chairman of a committee has enormous authority, and of course can shepherd a bill through, or can effectively prevent a bill from coming through. However, it is. I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, Representative Frank, Barney Frank, of Vermont or New Hampshire or something, I forget where he's from.
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, thank you very much. From Massachusetts. Representative Frank is the chairman of the House Committee on Financial Services, and he has actually, according to Dr. Paul, he has actually said that he will commence hearings on this. So this bill, H.R. 1207, is destined to move forward to hearings. It's at the stage of having been read, entered, and so forth, and it appears that it will definitely have hearings. Now, it needs to come, after the hearings, it needs to come to a full vote in the committee to be referred out to the floor of the House. If this bill has, H.R. 1207 has 179 co-sponsors, if it is able to garner another 38 co-sponsors and therefore have 218 co-sponsors, the bill will be lifted from the committee simply because because more than 50% of the House has signed their name to the lease and said this is what we want.
So that really a really key and interesting thing would be is if it got more sponsors, then the committee would not have any ability to essentially, to in effect de facto veto the bill.
That's correct.